But this graph is, as you can see at the bottom, how the journey of a project feels. So the x-axis here is time. So from the beginning of a project to the later parts of a project. Oh, let's see. I think I have a little pointer feature. I don't know if I do. Okay, well, I don't know if you can see my mouse. I don't think you can. So across that x-axis, the thick bar in the middle. And the y-axis, as you can see, has the happy to sad. So above the line, the higher up on the bar you are, the happier you are feeling, the more positive. And below the line, it's saying you're feeling a little bit, maybe those other feelings, a little bit more in the balance of anxious or worried or fearful, those kinds of emotions. But their point in creating this is, again, to sort of normalize that feeling that at the beginning you are so excited about your idea, and you know, you really are like it, you have a wonderful thought in mind, and maybe in the middle you are not so excited. You are starting to realize there's a lot more problems or questions than you have answers to, and you maybe are feeling a bit discouraged. But if the graph holds true, if you're hopeful, that at the end, once you get later in the process, you will feel a bit better. And I share this not only for a bit of humor, but also because I think there's some truth here, which is that even for experienced designers, I think I can speak absolutely for myself and probably for many other people on this call who have, even with a lot of experience designing, you hear people say, trust the process. But when you're in the middle of it, even as an experienced designer, sometimes you feel frustrated or challenged, and that's normal. And that's not a reflection on you necessarily as a designer. Again, it's part of the process. It's just challenging as a human being to go through and ideate and iterate and prototype and keep doing that. But it's obviously a necessary part of the process. So a question, I'm going to go back to the beginning of this conversation where we spoke about failure. And, I think, one can feel frustrated or challenged at many points along the way. But I think especially they talk about this low point. It's very interesting on the graph, that lowest point right under my sign where it says, I give up. What makes it turn around? And I would argue that once you get the feedback and that incorporate some of those ideas and start building that feedback into your design, that's when the light bulb goes off. That's when you have the insights about your project and you say, oh, I can approach this from a new perspective, or someone gave me a new idea. So that the hardest part actually becomes the point at which you sort of get some of that useful information. So think back to that failure, think back to that time when you failed and when you had to sort of, think about what insights you might have gained, and maybe even something you thought of this morning. Once you frame that as an opportunity for yourself to grow and change, it might still sting a bit, but it's more manageable. And in fact, when you look for that kinds of feedback, when the architect puts out their plans and wants to get feedback, that feedback is gold, and it turns good designs into great designs. So when you're going through this process, it is important to be realistic about how this feels, and that there are some difficult parts, and to be kind to yourself and to approach those feelings with kindness and curiosity when you get that kind of feedback, or when you're feeling a bit confused. Don't beat yourself up about it. I think to the degree possible, try to avoid that cycle of feeling bad and then feeling bad about feeling bad. It's like this never-ending possibility that you think, oh, I don't feel good about my project, and now I'm not a good designer, and all of this is nonsense. Notice that it's happening, acknowledge that maybe you feel that way, and try to reflect a bit and think about how you might, turn that into that light bulb moment for yourself, and how you might adapt your frame of mind. So now we're going to give two quick examples. First, I'm going to speak about a hands-on science museum called the Exploratorium. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this organization, but they are in San Francisco, California. I used to live nearby there. And they are famous for having hundreds of interactive hands-on exhibits. They were really a pioneer and continue to be in that area. And they design for really deep engagement and learning. It's a core value of the organization, so much so that they built their entire exhibit fabrication studio on the main floor, kind of to the side, and it allows the designers of those prototypes, of those exhibits, to sort of wheel them out onto the main floor, try them out before their official exhibits, get the feedback, wheel it back into the studio, tinker with it, wheel it back out again, try it out with the changes, and then wheel it back into the studio. So I had the pleasure of meeting with one of the lead exhibit designers at an educational technology conference, and I asked him, he was explaining about this process, and I said, oh, that's so interesting. How many times do you wheel the prototype out to the floor and wheel it back? How many times do you go back and forth for a typical exhibit? And I'll never forget this. He said, oh, about 100 times. And I said, literally 100 times or figuratively 100 times? He said, no, literally 100 times. And it blew me away. I said, wow. He does not see that as 100 failures. He sees it as 100 opportunities for feedback. Now, that's a bit of an extreme example, although I will say that even in doing little things, creating this presentation, other things, I tinker with it and I always kind of am working. But this mindset, I think, that they embody at the Exploratorium of trying things out and of building that into their process, making it easy for them to literally wheel things out from the studio onto the floor and back, was baked into their design of their museum, and it's central. So actually on their website, it even says, when they talk about exhibit design, and I'll read here, once we find a promising idea, we build a rough prototype and get feedback from staff and visitors as quickly as possible. Ideas may get dropped at this stage or morph into something new. If an exhibit seems to be working well, we'll build a more or less permanent version with increased attention to aesthetics and durability. Our exhibits are never done. We always watch for opportunities to improve them, and many exhibits experience several incarnations. The exhibits, like the museum itself, are a perpetual work in progress. Again, I just thought that was beautiful. I know it sometimes feels a little satisfying, and that sometimes we need things to be good enough and done enough. So they do put exhibits out on the floor, even when they still feel that it's never done. And that tension between constantly improving something, but then also feeling confident enough to put it out there, is the struggle of any designer. When do I show it to someone? When is my prototype good enough? It'll never be perfect, and don't strive for that. Just good enough is what you're looking for to get feedback. I thought that was just really interesting.